6 hours of rain, then 12, then a full day with no break in the clouds. Your fire is a wet gray smear on the rock. Your skins are waterlogged, heavier than they should be, pulling heat out of you instead of holding it in. The ground outside has stopped being ground. It's mud now, and mud that's starting to move. Nobody in the shelter says it out loud, but everyone's thinking it. Tomorrow it clears. It has to. You fall asleep wet and shivering, listening for the rain to let up. It doesn't. Morning brings the same gray ceiling and rain that's somehow heavier than the night before. Nobody here knows it yet, but staying dry was never going to be the hard part. None of the technology in this shelter was built for this. No waterproof layers, no sealed roofing, nowhere dry to retreat to. Hide clothing works by trapping warm air against skin. Soak it through, and it does the opposite, pulling heat out instead of holding it in. The fire is the real problem. Wet wood has to boil off the water trapped inside its own fibers before it can burn at all, so most of what's left of the flame isn't flame anymore, it's smoke. There's one trick that still works. Resin-soaked pine, the dense sap-heavy wood at the base of dead pine trees, burns even soaked through. Groups that knew where to find it kept a flame alive. Groups that didn't lost theirs by day 2. Losing fire doesn't just mean losing warmth. Cooked food is where most of the group's calories are supposed to come from. A raw root or raw meat actually costs the body more energy to digest than it gives back. Lose the fire, and the math on every meal quietly turns negative. Stored meat, kept dry for weeks, turns in days once damp reaches it. Mold moves fast. Once it's in, whatever's left isn't food, it's a risk. Hunting doesn't offer a way around it. Tracks that would hold sharp in dry dirt dissolve into mud within minutes. Prey isn't behaving normally either. Sustained rain pushes animals into shelter, which means even a skilled tracker is reading a landscape that's lying to them. Meanwhile, the body's own math is getting worse by the hour. A cold, wet human can burn several times their normal resting energy just generating heat through shivering. Energy demand is climbing. Food supply is falling. By day 3, that gap isn't discomfort. It's a countdown. By now, the ground is a different substance than it was a week ago. Soil that's absorbed days of steady rain loses the structure that holds it together. Footing that was solid a week ago is unpredictable now, and in a group with no medicine and no way to carry an injured adult any real distance, a twisted ankle isn't an inconvenience. It's a slow death sentence. The water above ground is changing things just as fast. A river that's absorbed a week of rain across its whole watershed can carry many times its normal flow, turning a crossing this group has used for years into something that can take a person off their feet in seconds. Familiar shortcuts are simply gone. And that's what actually matters most here. This group survives on memorized geography, where the water is, where the herds move, where it's safe to cross. That knowledge takes years to build. It stopped being true in the space of a week. Every one of these failures had been happening on its own. What nobody in that shelter could see yet was that they'd stopped being separate. Here's the mechanism, and it's worth being precise about, because this is the part that actually explains everything else in this story. Rain soaks the fuel. Wet fuel weakens the fire. A weaker fire means less warmth and less cooked food. Less warmth and less food means the body burns through its own energy reserves faster than they can be replaced. An exhausted, calorie-deprived person has less capacity to maintain shelter, gather fuel, or navigate safely. A weaker shelter and worse decisions mean more direct exposure to the cold and the wet. And more exposure drives the body's energy needs up even further. That's not 7 separate problems. That's one problem, looping back through itself, getting slightly worse on every pass. This is the actual shape of a survival crisis. It rarely looks like a single disaster. It looks like a system quietly tightening around itself, one dependency at a time, until the people inside it are fighting something that no longer has a single cause. By the sixth day, the danger isn't only physical anymore. Sleep deprivation and sustained cold both hit the same part of the brain responsible for patience and judgment. Tired, cold, underfed people misread each other faster and forgive each other slower. In a group this size, quiet cooperation is the actual survival technology, the thing every task from tending the fire to hauling water depends on without anyone having to think about it. Take that away, and small mistakes stop getting caught. But here's the thing that's easy to miss in all of that. Somewhere in this same shelter, on this same terrible night, one coal is still alive. Buried under a bed of ash someone has been rebuilding by hand for 2 straight days. A properly banked coal can hold heat for the better part of a day without ever showing a flame, and someone in a group like this one had the job of making sure it never went out completely. Around that one surviving coal in the dark, exhausted people are still talking. Low voices, not much energy behind them, but still talking. Nothing about starvation and sleep deprivation guarantees that. It happened because holding each other together had become its own survival skill. That coal outlasted the worst night of the storm. The storm itself had one more trick left. On the 7th morning, the sound on the roof softens, then softens again. Gray light instead of black, and underneath it something genuinely good is happening, even if nobody has words for it yet. Rivers running high push fish into shallower water, easier to catch than usual. Certain mushrooms flush up out of the ground within a day or two of heavy rain, appearing almost overnight where nothing grew a week earlier. And once the rain actually stops, the ground left behind holds tracks better than it has in months. For a moment, this looks like the ending. It isn't. The wood dry enough to burn clean is still buried inside a week of soaked timber. The food that's spoiled is still spoiled. The crossing that vanished under floodwater doesn't reappear just because the sky cleared. Rain is weather. It starts and stops on its own schedule. What it broke doesn't get that same reset. This is the part almost nobody pictures when they imagine a group surviving a storm like this. The hardest day isn't the worst day of rain. It's the first day after. Finding wood dry enough to burn means splitting open soaked logs to reach whatever's still dry at the core. Slow work, done by bodies running on a 5-day energy deficit and almost no real sleep. Every other task competes for that same depleted energy. Salvaging what food can be saved, patching a shelter that's been failing quietly for a week, relearning a landscape that no longer matches anyone's memory of it. The storm is over. The bill for it just came due. Here's what this week actually was once you step back. It was never really a story about rain. Rain was just the trigger. What it tested was everything rain touched without appearing to: fire, food, movement, shelter, energy, the trust between the people in that shelter, and the accuracy of the map they carried in their heads. None of it failed because rain hit it directly. It failed because all of it was connected, and rain only had to find one thread to pull. Ancient humans didn't spend this week fighting weather. They spent it holding a network of dependencies together with nothing but fire, memory, and each other. And for 7 days, barely, it held. This is the pattern behind almost every real survival story, not just this one. It's rarely the storm, the drought, or the cold snap that decides who lives. It's what that single trigger does to everything quietly wired underneath it. Pull on fire and food moves. Pull on food and energy moves. Pull on energy and judgment moves. Pull on judgment and the whole group moves. So picture it one more time. You're back in that shelter 7 days in, and the rain has finally stopped. You're not thinking about the rain anymore. You're thinking about the wood you still have to split, the food you still have to find, the crossing you still have to figure out how to make. The rain didn't have to kill you. It only had to break the systems keeping you alive.